Well, thank you guys for coming, first of all. And thanks to Nikos and Friso and Bart. At the beginning, I thought I would try to explain why this guy from Greece came here and is talking to you, and why would you be here listening to him? But you gave a very good explanation for that, so I'll skip that. So, I don't know, this is going to be sort of like a loose presentation, so you can even interrupt me the way we can, if you have a question or something. What I've thought of doing is, it's sort of difficult to take you through the whole work because it spans through quite some time, and it's almost 20 years now. But what I'll do is I'll explain briefly what the work is about, and then I will contextualize 4 pieces of work that connect to what Nikos and Bart and Friso are doing, and specifically this site. And from the last 2, I'll bring a couple of examples. And at the end, I'm going to show an example of the things I set up, sort of drew my attention while I'm here. And it's going to be in video form. And what you'll see from my understanding of this place is not the actual outcome of the residency, but it is a way for me to present to you what my consciousness somehow was able to pick up during this time. So basically what I do is writing. So I have sort of like a good dozen books so far out, and they span from, as Nico says, fiction to nonfiction to essays. They're mostly hybrid pieces of work that bring together an element of fiction, an element of recollection or theory, and an element of research. And well, to contextualize that and bring it closer to our understanding, until a point, I wasn't really conscious, but then I realized that my interest was turning towards the city of Athens and what my connection was to that, because I left Athens rather early, finishing school, went to study abroad. I decided very consciously to come back to Greece because I wanted to start writing in Greek. So my first connection to the place was language. And I say that because it's of paramount importance, because actually text and speech are of paramount importance in whatever I do, whether it is literature or whether it is visual. The narrative element is very important. But so I had to come back, and I had to somehow find my way in again. And I realized that the only way to do that is to do it through writing at first. But then again, after a point, I was trying to find a way to complement writing with other ways of exploring my connection to a place, which means what this place means and how I structure my own identity to that place. And the first instance I'll tell you, and this connects to the discussion about manifestos and the Manifesto Anthropophago, is a book that was published in 2010, and it's called The Parthenon Bomber, and it starts from a manifesto that was written and distributed in Athens in 1944, which was right at the time of the liberation of Athens from the Nazis, and 2 months before the Civil War. And it's a manifesto that asked for the demolition of all the classical monuments starting from the Parthenon. It's a very, very interesting piece of text. It's, you can't really grasp it because it's semi-serious, it's sort of ironic. It comes through, this lineage of texts, from the futurists and the Dadaists and everything. But it has a really important political and ideological edge when it concerns Greece, because of the time that it was published, and it was the time of the liberation from the Nazis. Was this aspiration of starting anew, starting from the tabula rasa, but also addresses this identity towards classical heritage and the idealization of the ruin, which for me is very, very important and actually connects to Werkspoor. Because ruins are, and I could consider this place a ruin, are places that are in a stage of transgression. they're not left to rot, and then they're not rebuilt anew. So they are in the middle state. They are, in a sense, in a state of liminality, which can be very fixed. Or it can lead into a new identity, a new structure, a new use. In Greece, there is a lot this understanding of staying in this state of fixed liminality. We're always still standing in the threshold between what is new and what is traditional, what is west, what is east. And everything focuses on the monuments and the remnants of classical heritage. So this first book started by creating this as-if situation. What if someone in 2010 reads this manifesto, and there's a long discussion about it, but I won't go into that now, and actually decides to blow up the Parthenon? So what would happen? And this as-if situation, this place of putting your imagination into a critical method, is what is for me very important in the way that I address my work. So I'm not going to explain my work. I'm not going to show you what the work is about, because what the work tries to do is open avenues to imagination and new ways of contextualizing things. So I'm only discussing sort of like the process of arriving to work. So this was the first book. It was a very short book. It was structured at 6 narratives of 6 people, and what happened when the Parthenon was blown up. And really what I realized from that process, because the book led into a conference that dealt with ideology and archaeology in Greece, and then there was a website that was built, and it was sort of like a controversy in Greece about this thing, because the book was considered a little bit dangerous. I mean, what happens if someone just actually it's crazy and does some sort of damage? But I then realized that we don't live under the Parthenon as is like the common notion in Greece. You live under the shadow of the semiotics of the Parthenon, because it's this point that it's up there and it just seeps through the city. Like it was actually next year from publishing the Parthenon Bomber, I was interested in actually looking through, writing a novel that deals with a flânerie and moving in cities, and walking and all this stuff. And I had this idea of taking a text by Siegfried Krakauer, which was written in Paris in 1908. It's a very interesting, very nice text called The Memory of a Paris Street. The Paris is like the exemplary place for the flânerie. And I was thinking of actually taking this text and rewriting it, having Athens in mind, trying to see if a city that it's not a city of modernity the way Paris is, it's not a city that actually has this linkage in the discussion with Western Romanticism, can actually sustain someone who's a flaneur. And I started taking walks having this novel in mind, and then I realized that actually this is not what was actually happening when I was out, that my attention was drawn to the immediacy of what was happening in streets in Athens in 2011, which was as the crisis was happening, and it was this state of emergency still, which is now is not. Now it has turned into a different situation. So I decided that I'm going to actually try and explore that. I didn't have a book in mind. So I was taking long walks in Athens for 3 months. It was October, November, and December, and 2011. And 2010. And I wasn't taking any notes. I wasn't recording anything. I wasn't stopping during the walks. I had a very stable and sort of like flowing speed into walking. I was taking some photographs, but I was never stopping. I wanted my consciousness to be in this state of, flow. So I was taking these long walks, and then I was coming back home, and I was writing the walk, but in retrospect. And I was doing that for 3 months. The actual book came out being, I also met a guy. He was homeless, like a neo-homeless, these people who run out of a job and stay rough for some time in Athens. So I had 3 encounters with him. So I talked with him a little bit. I wasn't even recording him. I thought I had to take some ethical distance from him. So I couldn't represent him as a person. And he knew that we were coming from different standpoints. So what I was doing was I was writing the dialogue the way I understood it and the way I was remembering it. So it's all my representation of that. And then I was doing some reading, and then there was some recollection on the actual walk. So I was looking at my own texts as an outsider, as much as I could. So the actual book is a construct of these 3 things. The description of the actual walk, my talk with this guy, and then my recollection of the actual walk and some pictures. And it's flashlight between the teeth. It's what Nikos read. It's just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the book. That's the French edition. So it's not a very long book. And there are a few pictures in it, but it's the way that it's written. It's in some ways try to reconstruct the fragmentary understanding of the experience of being out there. And I decided that I'm not going to edit it. So I took the last walk on New Year's Eve, 2011. In 2 weeks, the manuscript was handed to my publisher. So it was sort of like a risk for me, because I thought I'm going to just have this book out raw. And I'm sorry that I don't have things to show you, because I could show you from the Parthenon Bob, and I could show you from that, but it just didn't happen. Because then there's a documentary that's in the making, starting from that book. And it's a long process. It's an unscripted documentary. I'm working with a cinematographer. I'm also shooting myself, and it's going on, since 2011, and still not finished. Because the situation's, changed so rapidly. Which, you see, this is like a move from the pivotal point that stands for the city as a symbol and as a place of its semiotics into going into the streets themselves. And from that came another piece of work that's called Wanderer Consciousness, which is a reaction to what was happening in Athens from 2011 to 2014 or 15, which means that this state of emergency was somehow normalized. So it's this state of fixed liminality. It's a state in which many societies find themselves during the crisis. It's not only a Greek problem, and it's a situation where you try to fathom where you came from, but you don't know where you're going to, and then you have a problem into contextualizing how you're going to understand where you are. And the way I understood that, it was looking at objects that stand in public space and treating objects as personified entities, and try to actually stand and see how they become autonomous, how they get emancipated in public space, and then write on that. So turning from the people to the actual objects themselves, which are the fixed elements into our own reality. So that it's a book, which is that. It's also a very short book, and this is a number of black and white photographs and texts. It's like that. Like that. And this is a project that brings together 3 things. There's the book. There was an installation of photographs in a gallery. There was a map of Athens where different spots were pointed, because this also is a product of working in Athens and taking different trajectories in the city. And there were a number of videos in that too, where what was happening is I was visiting the actual spot where I took the photograph from, and I was taking a video of that spot at a different point in time. And I was colliding the two. And as I was doing that, and during the walks that actually came into being this project, I didn't have like a set goal as I had for flashlight between the teeth. It's like a completely different vector. It was counterintuitive to flashlight between the teeth, which is be out there, walk, and somehow let your consciousness produce the narrative itself. So try to be attuned to what comes through your mind when you're doing this. And in mental, it's sort of a meditative process because there's a lot of distraction and a lot of things. But after a point, you get to realize that there are things that stick out. And the things that stick out are the ones that you actually can remember when you came back from the walk. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos from that. And the text that you'll see is text that somehow, it isn't necessarily one that is connected to the actual spot. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But then again, I'm not trying to contextualize the work vis-a-vis its meaning. I'm just describing how it got to be produced. So I'm going to show you 2 videos from that, and these are the videos that were part of the installation together with the book and the photographs. We can talk about time and about giving space to observation and then opening an area for a new consciousness to be developed. But I don't want to go into that. I want to go to the next video. Okay. So there were 9 different videos in this installation. I mean, you get the drift. This is more or less what it was. For me, what's important is to let time and space for the different layers of the palimpsest of every experience to manifest itself. And then in this situation, there are a lot of layers that have to do with with the historic and the political subtext in both cases. I mean, how the National Library was built, who built it, what is the state of the National Library these days, what it means to have a National Library in a place like Greece. The other place, which is this empty lot, it's very close to a refugee neighborhood for which I have written another novel, which also brings together a different set of connotations that have to do with how Athens was built, which is the population that makes up this specific neighborhood in the past and now, because now there's a new wave of refugees that come in. And also this is a place that was a place of a lot of fighting during the Civil War, during the Battle of Athens. And you can still see in a number of buildings, you can see the bullet holes in there. So for me, and the sound that you were listening is because next to it, it's a playground, so kids were playing, and what you were listening is they were crying, there were numbers. They were playing some game with numbers. So all these things, for me, they contribute into this palimpsest that maybe it's something that is observable at first instance. Sometimes it's something that you can realize when you actually visit the work itself later. And then there are all these things that someone else brings on that you actually haven't realized. I mean, there are all these things. I mean, you say more than you think you say, and then people understand more than the things that you want to tell them. I mean, this is always the case. So this is sort of the understanding that I had, and this is how I came to try to explore as little as I could the understanding of Werkspoor Quarter. I had to read it over there to make sure that I get it right. And what happens is there are a number of elements that I sort of brought with me, because there's all this baggage that everyone brings in. And for me, it's important to realize that I need to have a place open for imagination. And this is very important not only for artistic work, but also for social work, for planning, for policy making. And I saw this place as a place that really stands in the threshold. It's not yet. It's been and will be. So how did you come to actually bring in aspects that you can think of? I mean, this is always in my mind. How can you learn something that you don't already know? And how can you think something that is beyond your domain of familiarity? So how do you go beyond this state? And my process in doing that is at first giving time. So just staying and just waiting to see what your own mind will produce because there's always this, I mean, you stay quiet and you stay silent, like in the middle of a city or everywhere. I mean, after a point, your mind itself will get into the state of that it will want to structure that thing. Even the fact that you're there for a minute, I mean, the circumstance will have to be structured in some way. So how do you structure that? And how can you break that and let other elements come into that structure? So what I did is I came, and the only way to do that is, in my understanding, try to, and this is how I worked for the Parthenon bomber, and you see also for DISJUNCTION that it was a process that was looking at starting points, which were objects, which were specific entities. And for me, this quarter, this factory was the starting point, and it's the point of reference. It's not something that I think I will want to limit myself at, but this is how I would like to start. I would like to start from the place that somehow creates the meaning for what is here. And what creates meaning for what is here is, I think, this place which is in this state of ambiguity. still. And I shot pictures, I shot videos, and I tried to put together very quickly, I mean, just in one morning, a few things that will, I hope, will give you a glimpse of how I came to actually approach it. That's it. It's not the actual, it's not the end product. It's the starting point for something that will be. But you will be able to recognize maybe which are the elements that someone who comes from outside is able to bring in. And these are some elements that have to do with the space itself, have to do with its history, and have to do with the conceptual framework that I'm bringing to this place. Right? And it's something like 9 minutes. full of glasses now?